Okay. So I'm gonna do this pretty fast so that we can prepare this link. YouTube, we're the YouTube link. We're live. Estamos en vivo en YouTube. Entonces, vamos a esperar unos segundos. Entonces, aquí, all right. So I think we should start. All right, I will speak a little bit in English and in Spanish. Hablaré un poquito en español y en inglés. Entonces, bueno, queremos darles la bienvenida a todos, a todas, aquí a este Open Studio virtual, con la presencia de nuestros artistas en residencia que han trabajado durante las últimas, bueno, hoy 6 semanas, en sus proyectos en consonancia, en relación y en vínculo profundo y en compromiso con nuestra tierra. Este es un programa en colaboración entre Mango Residencia para Artistas y Moku Art Studio. Mango está en Argentina, Moku está en Estados Unidos y trabajamos en colaboración para potenciar nuestro profundo mensaje de salvaguardar nuestra tierra, nuestra biodiversidad y todo lo que allí vive. Bueno, yo soy Mercedes, la directora de Mango Residencia. Nos acompañan los artistas y nos acompaña, por supuesto, Frida de Moku Art Studio. Frida presentará en inglés, yo en español. So Frida will present in English and I will present in Spanish. So I will give the word to Frida. Frida?
Hi, guys. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today in this wonderful virtual art studio for our artists and our program in our land. They have been hard at work for this week, 6 weeks, and we're incredibly excited for you guys to see their projects. If you are joining us in YouTube Live or in the recording, feel free to reach out to us. We will have a form later. And make sure that you keep track of the artists and stay at the end to make sure that you stay for the unveiling of the full exhibition. So after hearing from the artist, don't go just yet, because at the end we will have a special link that will direct you to the full exhibition.
Bien, entonces lo que haremos es presentar a los artistas, presentar sus proyectos o de qué tratan, y ellos harán su exposición, donde la intención es que nos comuniquen, nos transmitan y nos compartan sus procesos creativos, y al finalizar el encuentro daremos el link para la exposición virtual de los trabajos finales que ellos realizaron. Frida.
I forgot to mention, I am so sorry. My name is Vida Verlaje, and the program is done in partnership with Mango Residencia para Artistas, which is based in Argentina, and we are based in the US. But the Open Studio is a chance for you guys to get a sneak peek behind the artistic practices of the artists, see how their brain works, see how they develop their ideas, and then be able to really get a little bit more in depth when you see their final works. And so we'll be hearing from the artists, and they will talk to us a little bit about the project that they created during the residency. Mitch.
All right. I will start from our first artist in Spanish. Voy a presentar a nuestra primera artista. Su nombre es Vinotini, es una artista, escritora y naturalista de origen tamil que vive en California. Su práctica combina dibujo, tintes naturales, textiles e instalación para explorar la memoria, el desplazamiento y el sentido de pertenencia. En este proyecto investiga la relación entre identidad y paisaje, utilizando materiales provenientes de la naturaleza para reflexionar sobre el territorio, el conocimiento ancestral y el cuidado de la tierra. So, Vinotini, it's all yours.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. So are you going to share the presentation on your screen? I can hear you.
Would you like me to do that?
Yeah, because I...
All right. Voy a
Thank you.
presentar su presentación. Un segundito, por favor. Here we go. I'm not sure how to do this bigger.
That's...
No. Oh, here, I think this is it. No, compartir. Sorry about this. I thought I got it, but perdón, creí que lo tenía, pero no sé cómo agrandarlo. ¿Te parece bien si vamos así o alguien me puede indicar cómo agrandarlo?
Intenta darle clic al botón que dice presentación en la parte de arriba a la derecha.
Ok, perfecto. Gracias.
Listo.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And sorry, Vinatini, before you present, let me just introduce you in English, and that way, Mitch, you
Okay.
can do
Sure.
your little bio in Spanish after your presentation.
Okay.
But Vinatini is a Tamil artist, writer, and naturalist living in California. Her practice combines drawing, natural dyes, textiles, and installation to explore memory, displacement, and the sense of belonging. In this project, she investigates the relationship between identity and landscape, using materials sourced from nature to reflect on territory, ancestral knowledge, and caring for the earth. Vinatini, all yours.
All right. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for being here. I am, as you all heard before, I am a naturalist and a poet and drawer. My creative process usually begins with paying attention. I walk, observe, collect, and write and draw and read. I spend time on the land where I live in California, noticing seasonal changes, flora and fauna. At the same time, memories of my homeland remains present. My work grows from the conversation between these two landscapes. First slide, please. So I chose this title because this is what I am investigating all the time: self, land, and belonging. Next slide. So when I open my studio window, this is what I see. And you see shrubs and native trees on that small hill. And beyond that hill, beyond the greenery, is the hideout for all the species that are my friends. Oh, I like to think. Next slide. This is a place where I frequent during the summer. It's on the riverbank. Next slide, please. So this is a drawing that I made for this specific project, and it's actually text, my native language, which means land, Nilam, and it's been written backwards so people wouldn't understand. And it evokes a human figure. Again, going back to self, land, and belonging. Next slide, please. This one is actually an interesting piece because I didn't know that I'm going to go in this direction with the paper pulp, but I took a online intensive paper making class. So I gathered the flowers where I walk every day or often, and I saw this native plant blooming off out of the cracks between rocks. So I collected the flowers a few days and I pressed them, and used these dried petals in the little piece. It's very small. Next slide. This one is Apsara. Apsara is a water being in Hindu mythology. They live in the clouds and water, and they are very subtle and beautiful. So I call this Manzanita Apsara because we have Manzanitas on our property, and Manzanitas need fire to germinate. I'm kind of intrigued by that whole process, and it's also a very special plant for the Native Americans. So I kind of like, this is my Manzanita Apsara. So it's also kind of self-portrait. Next slide. This is an installation. It's silk fabric dyed with oak galls. Oak galls are also called oak apples. They grow on the branches of oak trees. These are created by a specific wasp. When the wasp lays the eggs on oak tree branches, it it kind of like grows around the egg where the egg was laid, and the round things formed. So I collected these oak galls, shattered them with millet, and boiled. And it's food for Native Americans. I mean, the acorns, and we have so many oaks, and they are magnificent. They are beautiful. So I thought I will honor this piece to the Native Americans and their land that I occupy as a settler and immigrant. It also embodies the practice that I grew up with, because we go tie little pieces of silk fabric onto the tree branches or tree trunks as an offering or prayer. So here I'm connecting both these. Next slide, please. It's the same thing, same concept, and I dyed the fabric with eucalyptus leaves and barks. Interestingly, eucalyptus is an invasive tree from Australia, and it's very prone to fire. I don't know, we have so many, why we have so many eucalyptuses in California. Next slide, please. This one is dyed with madder root, which was grown in California. Madder is an Asian origin plant, actually used in traditional dye practices all over the world. And so a friend of mine grows madder, and she gave me some root that grew on her land, and I used this for this project. Next slide. This one is ink on paper, and it came as a chance. How do I say this? It's kind of like an exploration. I went into the studio without any ideas, and I just laid water with a brush, and then the chance happened, and I loved the way the ink and the paper and everything reacted, and then I moved it around and put some red ink. And it looks like the womb of the earth, where we all came from, the black hole. Next slide, please. This is a rubbing from a tree, an alder tree, which is also a native California tree. It's beautiful. So this always reminds me of Guadalupe. The Virgin Mary's, that's the translation. I'm not sure. Next slide, please. So this is the inspiration. These pictures. I took these pictures in my homeland. Next slide. This is here on my behind my house. Next slide. These are Manzanita. One is a Manzanita, and the other one is a Madron. I'm speaking about my creative process. I always incorporate writing. Language appears in fragments in my practice, and I try not to use any toxic materials, because I am attentive to the environment and the body. And speaking of fabrics, it becomes my second nature or second skin. Research is also an essential part for my process. I read widely, particularly about drawing, ecology, history and mythology, and place, and allow these ideas to unfold slowly in the studio. Rather than illustrating a concept, I let materials, memory, observation, and chance shape the work. Each piece develops through experimentation, layering, and quiet repetition. My practice is rooted in lived experience, attentive observation, and the belief that art can hold memory, loss, resilience, and belonging all at once. Next slide. This one is a field drawing. I didn't submit this, I didn't upload this work on the website for this project, but this is a drawing, a recent drawing that I did in the field using the river water and the ink I brought with me. Next slide. I think that might be it. Yeah, thank you so much. That's, was it 15 minutes or less?
It's okay if you, take your time if you want to add anything else.
I think I can stop. My
All right.
throat is dry.
All right. I will go through just like a reminder in Spanish. Voy a hablar en español un poquito sobre su presentación, muy brevemente. Voy un segundito para aquí arriba. Es más que nada por un orden propio. Entonces, Vinotini nos comentó que esta es la vista desde su estudio, donde atrás de estos árboles se puede vivir toda la biodiversidad del espacio. Este es un lugar que ella frecuenta mucho y a partir de aquí en adelante son las piezas que ella nos contó sobre sus prácticas y procesos de creación. No voy a ir en tanto en detalle para que ustedes puedan después explorar esto en la exposición, pero básicamente esto está escrito en su idioma tamil, que significa tierra al revés. Lo escribe al revés para que simplemente se visualice y se represente la figura humana. A partir de aquí trabaja todo material natural, no tóxico. Esto es papel y aquí, bueno, también hay tintes naturales. Aquí ella tiñe sus propias telas y ha hecho homenaje a la nueva tierra que habita en los Estados Unidos, son tierras indígenas. Y bueno, aquí sigue con el concepto de las tintas, aquí como si fuese yo le digo, un calcado de un árbol. Se ha inspirado en estos árboles en su tierra natal, y aquí se puede ver este ejemplo, ¿no? De pasar a papel este calcado de árbol también. Estos son árboles nativos de su región actual donde habita, que es Manzanita. Y ella también en su práctica trabaja, en su proceso creativo, trabaja con escritura, poesía, y también hace investigación sobre historia, mitología, entre otras prácticas, y hace hincapié en que trata de trabajar con materiales no tóxicos. Bueno, esto es todo lo que tengo para resumir sobre su presentación. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much, Vinotini.
Thank you for watching.
All right. So we will go to our next artist. Iremos a nuestro próximo artista. Voy a ir en español primero. Entonces, vamos a hablar sobre Robert Henderson. Es un artista multimedia y músico de Arizona que trabaja en la intersección entre sonido, tecnología y territorio. A través de instalaciones, programación y grabación de campo, explora nuevas formas de experimentar el paisaje. En este proyecto, transforma el canto de las grullas son unas aves específicas de esta región, migratorias, en una obra sonora y visual que nos invita a reflexionar sobre las fronteras, el movimiento y nuestra relación con el entorno. Frida.
Our next artist is Robert Henderson, who is a multimedia artist and musician from Arizona, who works at the intersection of sound, technology, and territory. Through installations, programming, and field recordings, he explores new ways of experiencing the landscape. In this project, he transforms the calls of migratory cranes into a sound and visual work that invites us to reflect on borders, movement, and our relationship with the environment. Robert. Oh, you're on mute, Robert.
Can you hear me now? Yes. Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Apologies. I'm going to share a video because I recorded one. It's a little complicated in presentation. It's better to do it before. Let's see. Yes. Let's confirm that you can hear the audio.
Hello, my name is Robert Henderson.
Is that audible? Is that audible? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Welcome to my studio. I'm a multimedia artist and musician based out of Tucson, Arizona, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity today to talk to you a little bit about my creative process in general and my creative process as I went about creating the piece that I'm presenting for the Our Land residency. So I mentioned a moment ago that I do multimedia art, and that's art that involves, it's quite broad, but it involves sound, video, visual elements, technology, audience interaction. And in my particular case, I'm very interested in sound and visual presentation of sound. So the work that I'm presenting for Our Land and that I've done in the past has heavily used visual programming languages for manipulating sound, like Pure Data, Plug Data, or MaxMSP. And so I wanted to kind of do a quick introduction to that because I think the rest of my work won't make much sense. So I'll do a quick introduction to sort of this programming paradigm, and then I can talk more detail about how I use it in my work and how I'm using it in particular for the work I'm presenting for Our Land. So I'm here on the screen. I have a window, and I'm currently showing you Plug Data, which is, as I mentioned, it's a visual programming language for manipulating sound. And so let's do that. Let's do some sound manipulation. So let's suppose I wanted to create, I can zoom in so it's a little bigger. Here I'm gonna create a node. We're gonna do a little programming. I'm gonna say, give me some noise. So you can see here it's uniformly distributed white noise. And I'm gonna multiply that signal by a small number so that it's not super loud. And actually, if I hover here over this, you can see a little oscilloscope. You can see the sound wave. And then I can send this sound wave out to the audio output, and you should hear that. Yeah, let's make it even quieter. Yeah, so we have just noise, right? And now we can do various cool things with this noise. Like for instance, let me introduce a metronome that beats every 200 milliseconds. And then every time the metronome beats, it's gonna give me a random number between 0 and 100. And then let's divide that number by 100 so that we get a number that's between 0 and 1. And then let's pipe it into this thing. So that will actually change the volume. If this was modulating the volume, now we're going to pick numbers and it will modulate the volume. You need to start the metronome with this little button here. Ooh, exciting. So I have a little thing here. It's kind of cool. Let's make it even nicer. I'll just keep it really quiet. Let's add a little filter here, bandpass filter, and let's filter at 1,000 hertz. Oops, wrong kind of box. We'll filter that at 1,000 hertz. Let's add a little slider here. I put that in the wrong spot. We'll filter this at 1,000 hertz. We'll have a slider here that will go up to 500. And the output of this will then go into our player, and we'll filter that noise through this little filter here. And hopefully let's get something that sounds cool. That's kind of nice. Yeah. So I'm kind of filtering this sound at, filtering that white noise we heard before at a 1,000 hertz. And this slider over here is saying how wide that filter should be, essentially. Okay, great, we have a little sound here. And I could change this. What if you made it 500? Yeah, so what I'm doing here is I'm generating audio, right? I am programming with this sort of signal processing diagram, and I'm creating a recipe for generating sounds. Now, I like to think of this as kind of like a score, right? You might read a musical score, and it's an instruction for how to produce certain sounds in certain orders. The same thing is happening here. I'm saying produce white noise, produce random noise, and then multiply that signal by a value, or multiply that signal by a certain value every 200 milliseconds in a random way. Pass that sound through a filter at 2,500 hertz, etc. So I really think of this as being like a score. Now, one of the cool things about these scores is that this is a visual programming language, and so what I can do is I can actually arrange them on the screen. Look, I can move them around. And I don't know, that's kind of looking cool. I didn't prepare for this part, but what am I going to do with it? I don't know. It looks like a little cow or something with it, like a horn. There we go, that looks kind of nice. So I have this little cow creature that I've drawn on the screen with my score. It's continuing to produce sound. And really, this is sort of the core methodology I've been playing with in the work I'm presenting for Our Land, but also in previous work that I've done. Okay, so delete this. Yeah, so my methodology is sort of creating compositions, creating these sort of scores that are programmed, and then drawing with them. Now for Our Land, I'm returning to some work that I did recently with a colleague, the poet Johanna Skibsrud. We did an installation at this area in Arizona called Whitewater Draw that is the home to migrating sandhill cranes. These cranes have one of the longest migrations of any species on the planet. They come down to Arizona. They go various places, but there's a large population, 20,000 cranes or so, that gather in one area in Arizona for the winter. And then after the winter's over and it's more hospitable in the Arctic, they fly back to the Arctic where they have nesting grounds. So some of them travel, it's documented travel as far as Siberia. So they go from Tucson, Arizona to Siberia over the course of a year. So it's an incredible migration. And yeah, it's a beautiful gathering of animals there in Whitewater Draw. Yeah, so and I'm sort of interested in this theme in particular. Here in Arizona, we're a border state, close to the Arizona-Mexico border, and we're the site of a lot of. It's a contested space for questions of immigration and migration, and we have cranes migrating here, we have people migrating here, and there's all these questions about who belongs, whose presence is supported, and whose presence is excluded. The cranes themselves actually now have to be supported. The ephemeral, due to drought and increasing temperatures, the cranes have to have groundwater. The ephemeral sources of water that they need are no longer consistently accessible, and so groundwater is actually pumped into marshlands to support their presence. Yeah, so I'm sort of thinking about these issues of sort of place and migration in the environment for Our Land. For this previous work that I mentioned down in Whitewater Draw, I've recorded field recordings of these cranes. I like to play you some field recordings a little bit. So this is what the cranes sound like. pretty beautiful, I think. So I made that recording, and I was thinking about the sound of these cranes and sort of the concept of cranes, the cultural concept of cranes, and what came to mind is the idea of the paper crane, which is universal symbol of peace, and in particular, I started to think about the idea of folding paper into cranes, right? So transforming sort of one object into another through deformation, through folding, right? And I was thinking about analogs for that and the work that I do in the domain of sound. And you can think of certain kinds of synthesis, like we just synthesized that sound on the screen a moment ago. We could think of that as a kind of folding of the sound wave. So that filter that I put on the white noise is taking the sound that is outside the parameters of that filter and squishing it down. It's like smushing those frequencies down. So just like you might fold a crane, we can imagine generating a sound through certain types of synthesis. In this case, subtractive synthesis. We can think of it as like a kind of folding of the sound wave or deforming the sound wave into a new object or a new sound. And I wanted to play with that idea for the project that I'm presenting here. So what I did was I took individual crane calls. So here's an example of one crane call. That little call. And if we look at that call, we can see here, zoom in a little bit. I believe, this is that call we're just hearing. So this is the visual representation of it. And here on these bands, it's dark where there is more energy. On the y-axis here, it's frequency, so frequency in hertz, and the x-axis is time. And you can see, for instance, like in this little band here, there's, a lot of energy here and here and here and here, sort of repeating pattern at various frequencies. So maybe this is 700 hertz and that's 1100 hertz, etc. I went through and for 9 of these calls, extracted that data, like where is the energy in the frequency spectrum, and I plotted it like here. So find one with more data so it looks more impressive. So here's crane call number 3, and there's energy at 800, 1700, 2500, 3500 hertz. This is how wide those bands are. So I extracted that information, and then I was able to sonically sort of profile these crane calls. Okay, so I mentioned before I have this idea of playing with this idea of doing origami, right? Folding a paper into a crane, a piece of paper into a crane. So for this project, I was playing with the idea of folding paper sounds into crane sounds. So what I did was I recorded paper sound. So here's some paper sound for you. So those are my paper sounds. And I then combined them in the following way. So I built a large number, actually 9 of these networks. So you saw on the previous page, we did a tiny little one. Here we've gotten crazy with it. And let me zoom in on that first crane call 1. These numbers here, the frequency, these 5900, 5000, these are the frequencies at which we find lots of energy, right? Lots of sound in the crane calls. So I took that data that I extracted from the calls, I programmed it into this network, and what this network is doing is, you see it says open paper sound.wave. I'm opening that paper sound, I'm processing it in various ways. In particular, I'm filtering out sounds or frequencies that don't correspond to frequencies that are active in the crane's call. And that allows me to generate a fake crane call, a synthesized crane call. So let me show an example of that. So here is the original crane call, and then here's my synthesized version. Not perfect, but a paper crane doesn't look exactly like a real crane. So I think I've done something here. So that's conceptually what I've been doing. I've been taking these paper sounds and turning them into crane calls through subtractive synthesis. That's sort of stage one. I mentioned previously that, once I had this visual programming language, look, I can move these guys around and, draw with them. And so I want to show that here, just one example. I then took those networks and I drew paper cranes with them. So we kind of have a kind of double origami. We have the sonic origami, and we also have sort of the visual representation of paper cranes. That's not it. I've colored them, and so I want to give you kind of maybe leave with this. So what I have here is I have 9 different cranes. I've rotated them, sort of what I'm calling tessellating them. I've tessellated them. Interesting visual impact. Eventually, I might want to fold these into origami cranes, like actual paper cranes, and so I wanted them in 4 like this because you want a square piece of paper to fold origami. But yeah, these are the cranes that I made, and I'm going to play you the audios. You're going to hear the 9 actual cranes, and then you're going to hear my 9 synthetic cranes that are generated by these networks you see here on this video. Yeah, so those are the cranes, and those are the synthetic cranes. That's my process. So my process has been sort of generating through synthesizing these synthetic crane calls, and then producing a digital representation of these paper cranes that have been incorporated in the final piece, which you'll see at the exposition. Yeah, so I can leave you with that. I can say that what I've taken away from this work, and what I hope you take away from it, is an appreciation for careful listening. If you love that sound, you have appreciation for the animal that produces that sound, or instrument that produces that sound. And it's made me deepen my appreciation for the sandhill crane. And if you ever come to Arizona in the winter months, I highly recommend you try to see them and hear them and listen carefully. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Robert. It was very helpful to have the subtitles in Spanish, because it would be hard for me to explain it. Entonces, le agradezco a Robert que haya tenido la traducción en español, porque realmente hubiese sido muy difícil para mí poder hacer un resumen explicativo de esto. Es realmente muy interesante su trabajo, y bueno, nos sorprende con esta metodología artística que él crea tan particular. Bien, vamos a continuar con nuestro siguiente artista. Ariel Maldonado es un artista de Los Ángeles que trabaja con escultura y arte textil. Su práctica explora cómo el arte puede ayudarnos a comprender conceptos científicos relacionados con la salud del planeta. En este proyecto utiliza una estructura tejida para representar la interconexión de la biodiversidad y cómo la pérdida de especies debilita el equilibrio de los ecosistemas. Frida?
Ariel Maldonado is an artist from Los Angeles who works in sculpture and textile art. Her practice explores how art can help us understand scientific concepts related to the health of our planet. In this project, she uses a woven structure to represent the interconnectedness of biodiversity and how species loss weakens the balance of the ecosystem. Ariel.
Hello, thank you. I'm going to share my screen in 1 second. Can everybody see that? Okay. So this project is called Make It Big, Make It Blue, Make a Billion, Make It About Biodiversity. So I was told that this should be about our back, everything that happens in the background and how we came across working and how we come across our work. So my starting point when I began this project was how do I make work about climate change without it being on the nose? So I think we've all seen waves of trash, waves of straws, waves of spoons, trash sculptures, things like that. I didn't really want to make something like that. And I also didn't want to make something that um, you could see the sculpture like secondary to the sum of its parts. So what I mean is like the little soda caps that you see whenever somebody makes a sculpture of those, or like any piece of trash, we really see the material first, and it's really inexplicable from the actual sculpture itself. And then when making work about talking about climate change, should I consider the longevity of the materials? So if I'm making work about climate change, but then I'm using harmful processes or materials, feels a little bit counterintuitive. So if I'm choosing eco-friendly materials, how am I defining eco-friendly? And then there are so many problems that we associate with climate change. How do I define or how do I like pick which one, right? There's too many things and it's part of the overwhelm. So, what do I want to talk about? Do I want to talk about my feelings, my experience? Do I want an activist statement? Do I want to talk about the science? There's just so many different facets to this. So, this was the I don't know, it felt like a giant knot that I had to like pull apart the thread, and it was very confusing, and I probably have spent the past like 2 to 3 years thinking about this. So this is not something that has come quickly. Um, hang on, let me go. Oh, hang on, let me go next. Okay. So our final week, every week here we had a theme of the week, and our final theme of the week was dig in, and I thought that that was really specific and useful to my presentation or my project out of all the projects. So I love having a lot of synchronicity between my work and my play. So while I was on a personal and creative level exploring all these concepts, on a professional level for my day job, I started learning about this thing called the planetary health boundaries. This is the graph for that. So the green is what a healthy planet would be, and the red is how unhealthy each of these things are. Um, I yeah, I'll give you the really quick. So this one is how much trash is there in the world. This is our ozone layer. This is how polluted is our air. This is ocean acidification, so all problems related to a warming ocean. This is things essentially related to chemical fertilizers, how much chemical fertilizers have thrown us off. This is how much drinking water do we have and how much water do we have available for ecosystems. This is how are we changing our land. And then this is what I'm going to focus on, so I'll skip this one for now. And then climate change is actually just one way to measure our health. So I compare it to the human body. We can measure climate change with how much CO2 is there and how hot is it because of how much CO2 there is. The same way that you can have a broken bone, but your digestive system still works. We have different ways to measure health, right? And you might say, I'm not at my most healthy because I have a broken bone, but there are other parts of you that are still functioning. Your heart still works, your circulation still works, things like that. So what I decided to really dig in on was biosphere integrity. So this is one of the ones that is divided into two slices. So functional is ecosystems. We can think about how many ecosystems have been destroyed and how many healthy existing ecosystems still exist. Thinking about invasive species, right? And this doesn't matter if it's water, land, or anything like that. This is any type of ecosystem. um, what are we destroying them for, right? And this doesn't just mean that we are raising them to the ground. This can mean that we're introducing an invasive species that's destroying an ecosystem. This is, when a city is trying to plant plants on the side of the freeway and they're planting plants that make no sense. And then like you're starving out other animals. And then there's genetic biosphere integrity. So this is species within a family. So what I mean is if we want to save all the birds, we cannot just save chickens. Like you can't put chickens in Antarctica. When we try to say save the bees, people say you can't save a European honey. You can't just save the bees. But I think birds makes more sense because we kind of think of bees as like, well, how is one bee going to pollinate different than the other? But we can clearly understand how a chicken is not going to be able to survive or provide the same things in an Arctic environment the same way a penguin could. So this is thinking about, you know, we tend to have specific favorites and we tend to support specific favorites. Last year, I met with a top researcher for turtles and he like saves turtles, and he told me that 97% of all international funding that goes to save the turtles actually just goes to sea turtles, and all other species of turtles share that 3% that's left over. So this is sort of what I'm thinking about when we're thinking about like how are we supporting all animals equally. So then when I realized what I was going to talk about, I had to think about like, how am I going to do this? So when I was demonstrating the concept, I'm thinking about, okay, I'm interested in talking about this slice specifically. What would I be displaying? Would I be displaying a drawing? No, I don't like drawing. Would I do a poster? I didn't really want to do like an activist poster. So how would I like demonstrate this concept? And what concepts would there be if I wanted to demonstrate them? What would be interesting to myself if I was a viewer as well? I love installation. I love being told like why I should care about something. I think that I think like creativity is an inherently personal thing. And so often our starting point is for ourselves, which is like it should be, you should be interested in the work that you make. But I think this is such an important topic that I owe it to the topic that I'm working with to make an intentional effort to make other people understand. So why should anybody care about what it is that I'm doing? Because they don't have to. And so I think it's on me to provide that for them. And then thinking about materials. So my actual previous artwork before this, I don't have any pictures of it in this presentation, but it actually been an exploration of greenwashing. So if I was exploring greenwashing, this one I didn't really want to be that. And so it was important for me to have a project that would not disintegrate over time, and that would be able to disintegrate over time without leaving harmful materials behind. And this is where like the personal exploration would come into play. Is I've already made work that kind of explores greenwashing, so I kind of wanted to take it to the next step of like the project is eco-friendly without it being about being eco-friendly. Like it should just be that, and that not necessarily be the point of it. At the same time that this is all happening, I'm looking for ways to be on my phone less, a problem that I'm sure many of us have. Literally looking for anything to keep my hands busy. And I started exploring macrame and started listening to like podcasts, finding documentaries or movies, just like more long form video to counter the harmful effects of like short form video. And I am just like desperate to keep myself like manually stimulated and mentally stimulated. So I started with this idea of like a chainmail. And these are my like beginning explorations. This is not the piece itself, but this is a couple little ideas here. I was looking at chainmail, thinking about how interconnected all species are, and thinking about if you start pulling out different little chainmails, if you pull out one, probably nothing will happen. Two, probably nothing will ever happen. We've had billions of years of natural selection, but when we start really ripping out a lot of links, that's when you're going to start feeling it. So I started buying cotton cord and I started macrameing this chainmail. And to make a link, you make one ring and then you attach it. So you do this 2-1-2 pattern. And I would just make these chains 2-1-2-1-2, and I would start joining them. And then that's kind of what it looked like when it was hanging on its own. But I started combining these. So these photographs will be in the gallery, but this is sort of like where my starting point was. And then my final slide is this is sort of like how my project all came together. So first I had this random advice from a professor in college, which was the beginning of this project and the project title. So this is Make It Big, Make It Blue, Make a Billion. He told me that I actually studied ceramics in school and not macrame or fiber arts or anything like that. So he said if you wanted to make it big as a ceramic artist, those were 3 ways that you could guarantee that was make big work, make blue work, or make a billion of something. And I added a 4th B, which was make it about biodiversity. But this, so this kind of was always there, but not necessarily a part of this. So I had this desire to make work about climate change. At the same time, I'm learning about planetary health for work. I want to make eco-friendly work, and I want to be off my phone. So I'm really prioritizing like learning over brain rot. I want to explore my different curiosities and like spend my time on my phone, maybe doing more experimentation. But at the same time, I don't want work that is too on the nose about it. I don't want people to see this and necessarily be like climate change. I also want to make something that like looks visually appealing. And I'm also looking for like an endless well of topics, which because it's such a vast issue, I feel like I can really sort of swim around and be a hummingbird and kind of jump from problem to problem. And that was how I sort of like landed in on this project. I feel like I spiraled out in a bunch of different places, and eventually those spirals like merged together into my project, which can be found on the gallery, on the virtual gallery. That is all for me.
All right, thank you very much, Ariel. I will try to say it shortly in Spanish. Entonces, voy a tratar de ser lo más concisa posible. Ariel nos acaba de mostrar y contar todo su proceso creativo desde el inicio hasta lo que llegó como resultado en su trabajo de hoy. Que
Do you
presenta,
want the slides?
all right, yeah, we
Okay.
can do that.
Yeah. Sorry. Okay.
Voy a tratar de ir lo más concisa posible. Entonces, su lema, o sea que empieza, el título de su proyecto es como después termina explicando, pero ella se ha preguntado varias cosas sobre esto, sobre el cambio climático, sobre los materiales que debería usar, que si son eco-friendly o no, cuáles elegir. Y bueno, tardó 2 a 3 años en decidir sobre esto, no es algo que hizo en un tiempo corto. ¿Quieres pasar a la otra? Entonces, también tuvo mucho enfoque científico, y aquí nos muestra este gráfico donde se puede ver, por ejemplo, la cantidad de agua que hay disponible en el planeta, la parte oceánica, la parte de gases, puede ser lo gris son los gases.
Sí, y cuánto
Ok.
basura también.
Ok, y cuánta basura hay también en el planeta. Y también sobre las especies, la biodiversidad. Entonces, sobre todo este mapa visual se focalizó específicamente en uno. Puedes ir a la otra si quieres. Que es la situación de la biodiversidad y los ecosistemas, ¿verdad?
Ujú.
No sé si lo sé explicar en detalle, pero este era como el punto específico y lo que ella trata de preguntarse, o en realidad lo que observó, que es súper interesante, es que, digamos, que nosotros todavía no vemos esto de manera holística como un todo. Es como que, por ejemplo, dio el ejemplo de que el dinero que se destina para salvar las tortugas, la mayoría de ese dinero va para las tortugas marinas y solo el 3% va para las otras especies de tortugas. Entonces, ese ejemplo, bueno, lo trasladó a otras especies también, y de alguna manera lo que ella busca es la integridad. Esto lo anoté acá. ¿Cómo demostrar este concepto de integridad en la atención, este concepto en la atención a la integridad de los ecosistemas? Es decir, ella busca que, digamos, sea esta mirada de el todo, no solamente algo separado y distante una cosa de la otra, ¿no? Sí, está bien. La siguiente. Ah, perdón. Y entonces esto de dig in, que es el concepto, porque todas las semanas nosotros dábamos un concepto, y el último de la última semana, que es dig in, que sería manos a la obra. Ahora si querés poder pasar. La trajo a esto, y entonces hizo como una tabla donde ella podía, volcó toda la parte conceptual, que es lo que ella quería transmitir, y las opciones de materiales que podía utilizar. Entonces, bueno, si querés pasar a la siguiente, a ver si está ahí. Sí, entonces pensó en algunas cosas y fue uniendo un montón, también el aspecto personal, que es que ella también quería dejar de estar tiempo en el teléfono, entonces ella, si bien tiene una formación en cerámicas, empezó a estudiar o a realizar como autodidactamente macramé, que es una técnica, digamos, bueno, de hilado tejido, ¿ok? En textil. Bueno, no necesariamente, pero en este caso sí. Entonces, la siguiente. Lo primero que pensó fue en esta malla, en esta cota de malla, que es lo que antiguamente se usaba como para en la parte medieval, y entonces cómo estaba formada y cómo, digamos, lo trasladó a su técnica y utilizó estos cordones de algodón para empezar a tomar la idea de una cadena, una malla que uniera todo. La siguiente. Bueno, entonces aquí culmina con en realidad el inicio, que es todo esto lo pudo trabajar empezando con su asesoramiento con su profesor, que le decía esto, ¿no? Como que make it, o sea, hacelo grande o hacelo azul,
O hacer un video.
o hacelo billones. Y ella le agregó que sea la B de biodiversidad. Todo esto en inglés son 4 Bs, 4 B largas. Entonces, más sumado esto de que quería dejar estar en el celular, ha llegado a la conclusión y al resultado final que verán en la exposición, que enseguida les pasaremos el link para que la puedan navegar. Espero haber hecho un buen resumen. Gracias. Ok, entonces vamos a continuar con nuestra última, pero no menos importante artista, Lydia Ford. Voy a hablar sobre Lydia. Lydia Ford es directora de teatro, investigadora y docente en Estados Unidos. Su práctica explora cómo el arte puede fortalecer nuestra relación con el mundo más que humano y con los lugares que habitamos. En esta residencia desarrolló una serie fotográfica que invita a detenernos, observar con atención y redescubrir el bosque como un espacio de conexión y reciprocidad. Frida.
Our last but not least artist is Lydia Fort, who is a theater director, researcher, and educator in the United States. Her work explores how art can strengthen our relationship with the non-human world and with the places we inhabit. During this residency, she developed a photographic series that invites us to pause, observe closely, and rediscover the forest as a space of connection and reciprocity, I'm sorry, Lydia.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much. I'm going to share slides, so give me just a second. Unfortunately, I am not so good at this. Hang on. Sorry, guys. Sorry. Where have you gone? Here you are. Give me another second. I apologize so much. I'm like trying to find it in the list of a mazillion things that I happen to have open. Is it possible? Can I send it to you? It's a PDF. Is that okay? Okay. I wish I sang and then I could sing a fun song while we're waiting.
Are you sending it through email, Lydia?
I am. It's probably too big for me to do it another way, but it should be coming to you right now.
Okay. Bueno, cosas técnicas que pueden pasar. Ya estaremos aquí compartiendo. Todavía no me ha llegado nada. There's nothing here, Lydia. Sorry. But it will take a little bit. I mean, don't worry. Y mientras if you mean I would like to start like with a little introduction until I have the PDF. Do you think this is a good idea?
Sure, absolutely.
Great.
So as you heard, my name is Lydia and I am a theater artist. Particularly and specifically, I'm a theater director. And my work is, I would say, mostly known for blending movement and rhythm and choral aspects. And I don't mean singing. I'm thinking of like Greek chorus. And I'm a big fan of blending time and space in the same location on stage. So in other words, ancestors that might populate a play are also speaking in the same time space as the characters who are alive currently. But what that means is I mostly get hired to do work, and I was just sharing with my fellow peers that I was really excited about being able to explore something that's of interest to me in my own sort of terms. And I didn't want to write it. I didn't want to write a play, but I did want to do something that felt like movement. And I started early on doing performance pieces. So it was a return, if you will, to that. But actually getting out into the forest to do my research, I ended up finding myself coming back again and again to forest bathing, which is something that I was certified in. I became a certified forest therapy guide in January. And that is basically a process to connect us to our relationship. And if you don't have one, hopefully you'll find a relationship with the natural world through forest bathing. And you've probably heard that it actually is very helpful for mental health and physical health and well-being. Has all of these benefits in terms of calming the body and the mind and so forth, so on. So when I started going out, I kept noticing that I was drifting towards that again and again. Thank you so much for the slides. And so I started to move away from creating a performance piece into just reflecting on how do I share what it's like to do a forest bathing walk? What happens to attention? How do we notice things? Where do we find moments of inspiration? one of the things that is kind of a slogan, if you will, for forest bathing is that the guide opens the doors and the forest is the therapist. So it's not a sense of the guide saying, this is what you should see, but just allowing an opportunity for someone to engage however they might with the world around them. So forest bathing asks us to slow down considerably. And that for us might be hard, and some people it is hard because we feel like we have to be busy and we have to be doing things every second. But taking that time to slow down and just to sit and breathe and let things come to you and then to give back is and can be an incredibly fun process. And for me, it was definitely something that felt life-changing. So when I start out doing research for a play, it's a lot of time looking in books, videos, music, even images, and I don't necessarily know what I'm looking for other than the factual information that I need to do the play. But I start to amass a collection of things, and then I start to notice kind of a through line through them all. And then I go, oh, wow, that's why I selected this particular image or why I selected this particular song. And it starts to form a foundation of what I want to communicate. So similarly, that's how I began this process. And so every time I went into the woods, I was just there collecting information and having experiences. So if you don't mind, the next slide, please. Thank you. I began to photograph a lot of different things, as you might imagine. So there was photographs of the ground, of soil, of dirt, of soil becoming sand, of the red clay that you might find anywhere in Georgia. And then it became trying to explore what is left behind, which led to this idea of traces. I didn't want to photograph traces of human or animal contact in the natural world, but what is it that we take when we leave the forest? Or what traces does the forest leave itself? And so lots of images like these too, of leaf litter and growth of plants at the same time. And if you've ever been to a rainforest, this was a big surprise for me, was how much growth and death there is at the same time. There's this constant regeneration, and it kind of caught me off guard. And so I think subtly I was influenced by that idea of trying to capture these two things as well. But when you start doing forest bathing, the first thing is slowing down and using all of your senses. So that means taking the time to listen deeply, smell what you smell, and even taste. Whether that's, what you ate, it just might happen to be that, or perhaps you taste something on the wind, what you feel on your skin. All of your senses get engaged. Next slide. And so you'll see there's lots of images also of plant life, not necessarily trying to take beautiful photographs. I'm not a photographer, but just trying to record the moments where I slowed down to investigate, pay attention to, listen to the land. Next slide. And these are all from different urban parks and nature preserves in Atlanta, Georgia. I noticed some leaves. Again, you'll notice the death and the life at the same time, shapes starting to emerge, and encounters with plant and insect and animal life. Next slide. And lots of trees. I'm a big fan of trees. And so in this process, I fell in love with loblolly pine trees. They're my favorite tree because the bark is so unique and just so beautiful. Next slide. I also took, pictures of things that kind of were surprising to me. Like this is a fallen tree, and the roots We're looking at them from the underside as the tree fell over. And this is kind of like an amazing sort of experience because it was huge. I wasn't very close to it, but it definitely was taller than me. I'm a short person, I'm 5'2", but if you can imagine, this has got to be at least 6 feet tall, at least. Next slide. And one of the amazing things I think that really started to shift my perspective in terms of doing this process was trying to think about how do I capture what it's like to hear what a forest guide might say, a forest bathing guide might say on a walk with what someone is looking at. And so I started by taking a invitation, is what we call them. And an invitation is basically a sequence of things that one could do or notice. And you don't have to do them. You're welcome to do whatever you like, but the invitation is there as a jumping off point. And so I created this invitation that is about opening up your heart to the natural world and inviting a being into your heart and having a moment with that being, whatever that being is. And so I took the words of that and laid them over a particular image of a path because it felt like this is what forest bathing is. It's like being on a path on a journey. And I enjoyed it, but then I was like, okay, now what? Because it's not quite doing what I want it to do. Because then people are going to try to read it, and then I don't really want them to read it. So then, next slide. This was the next stage in its evolution where I separated the text from the image and started taking out words and just playing with what are these important words that kind of would land on someone? How do I express the same thing as the entirety of the invitation through select words, and then playing with the lightness and darkness of the text itself. And if you see the final piece, you might notice after spending some time with this, because that's always the idea, is to spend some time with the work, that I've created a path through the words themselves that one could follow with their eyes. But it takes time, and it's like that kind of interaction, which I'm hoping folks will have with the work, rather than just identifying what it is they're looking at, but staying longer to see what sort of things come up for them as they're investigating and what they're noticing about the investigation in and of itself. A bit philosophical, I apologize, but there it is. Next slide. This was another thing that kind of stuck with me, was photographing reflections on water. And here's an example of that. This is, if you can tell, there's like a leaf on the right side of the image. It's small, but still noticeable. And so some of the images I was interested in capturing the real world and the reflected world. And, you know, how much of a balance do we want? What is it to see the reflection of the world? And is it possible that the reflection sees the world, the trees see the reflection? Again, a lot of philosophical thinking, but what happens as waves or other things interact with that reflection? How does it change? And so forth, so on. Next slide, please. And another image of that kind of exploration. You can't quite see it in this one, but there's a couple of leaves floating on the surface, and there's something in the upper right corner which got cut off, but it's basically a branch that's coming out of the water, just as a way to orientate oneself to the reflection, the surface of the water, and then the natural world itself that's also occupying it. Next slide, please. I also became interested in ecotones, in those places where two types of land will meet and connect with each other in the same place, and that space that becomes the interaction of both. And this was an interesting moment for me because as I was spending some time in this particular area, I started to notice that it was raining, not because I felt it on my body, but because of the drops that were hitting the water. And I wanted to capture that. And so ultimately, I wasn't really able to. You kind of see something happening on the surface of the water, but it can be interpreted as lots of different things. And then that's when I realized that duration was necessary to kind of convey some of the things that happen when one is on a forest walk. Although my collection of images for this doesn't really go into duration, there's no video, but my hope is that people might begin to encounter what might this do over time? Like, what does this landscape do if you were spending an hour there or 90 minutes there? How might this landscape change? And ultimately, how might you with it? In all of these, I would spend time lingering. Sometimes I'd visit the same space again and try to see it through the same eyes, but always different. This is one of those places that I revisited. And this is something that wasn't there the next time I went back. So there's always that surprise of how the land changes around us and what is our relationship to a changing world. Next slide, please. And then I tried some images where I was looking at land from different angles, land and trees, what happens when we shift our attention, how does it change what we're seeing, does it change what we're seeing? And I was also interested in shadows, and this image kind of plays with both. How shadows come through tree leaves and affect the ground and the earth, and what does that interplay then mean for us as we're staying with the water and the rocks and sand in this particular picture. Next slide. And you might remember the tree that had been that had fallen, and this is the root system underneath that was exposed. And so sometimes I got really intrigued by how things looked like they were from outer space. They didn't look like they were from the same thing that I was actually looking at. And so that became of interest to me. I didn't include this particular image just because it felt like it was out of place within the overall grouping of images that I showed, but it was a part of my process to discover how we interpret different things and the associations that we make, and how our own world can feel otherworldly sometimes. And how just like amazing some things are. Like, I would never expect to find a neon-like color in nature, but there it was. And next slide. And this is one that I really think does a lot to describe what forest bathing might be like, where you might stop to notice one thing, like you might stop to notice the unopened blossoms, but at the same time, suddenly a creature enters into the relationship that you're having with the plant. And then now you notice there's a third party in this relationship. And then you might notice a fourth party. And how does that change? And how is everyone interacting? And so another invitation that I had created was about, like, how do we imagine other beings speaking to one another? And what do they say to one another? What is their engagement like? And if it's communicating to me, how would I ever possibly hear or sense in some way what is trying to be shared with me? So this was one of those images that I feel like really captures a kind of process of opening oneself up to the moment. And I think the next one's the last one, or that's the last one. Yes, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Lidia. Voy a hacer un pequeño resumen. Entonces, Lidia realiza fotografías, pero en un sentido de transmitir lo que sería cómo comprender y cómo compartir la sensación de hacer un baño de bosque. Ella dice que el guía abre la puerta y el bosque es la terapia. Cada vez que una persona o ella va al bosque, se vuelve observadora. Ella ha mostrado todas las fotografías que tienen que ver con este concepto, observar, bueno, en el caso de la arcilla en el piso, y entonces empieza a hacerse ciertas preguntas a partir de estas observaciones, y nota que cuando algo crece, también algo está muriendo, y todo el tiempo pasa esto. Es una característica de un bosque como el que ella habita o ha habitado. También tuvo la idea de compartir todo esto como artista y con otras personas. Entonces, también invita a oler, inclusive probar y abrir todos los sentidos cuando uno está en un bosque. Entonces, todo esto lo volcó en palabras, donde ella nos mostró una imagen con texto. Ahí había como una invitación con sus palabras y una pequeña guía, pero luego pensó que no quería que las personas se pusieran a leer, entonces, digamos, desarmó el texto y empezó a seleccionar qué palabras dejaba, qué palabras quitaba, y bueno, llegó como a un resultado. Y bueno, el resto de las fotografías reflejan sensaciones, reflexiones, pero sobre todo sensaciones que ella ha tenido y observaciones de estos bosques. Nosotros, quiero agregar esto, nosotros también hemos tenido en esta edición no solo la mirada científica, donde recibimos un aporte muy valioso de información oficial a partir de la observación científica con quizás conclusiones o con quizás, sí, experiencias que se realizan, pero también hemos tenido participantes ancestrales o de una comunidad que representan comunidades ancestrales, donde también lo que los conecta o desde donde viene la ciencia en realidad es desde el ejercicio de observar. La ancestralidad se basa en eso. Entonces aquí Lidia nos transmite, digamos, de alguna manera, que estos bosques o estas pausas que uno puede llegar a ejercitar o hacer, lo conectan directamente con ese ADN que tenemos cada uno de nosotros como humanos, con esa ancestralidad. Bueno, creo que esto es todo. Esto es un aporte, digamos, desde nuestra mirada de residencia, y nos gustaba concluir con este proyecto porque eh, cada uno tuvo como su cadena respecto al siguiente, y esta era una linda forma de cerrarlo. Bueno, no sé, Frida, si querés aportar algo en inglés.
Yeah, so Mitch was just saying how we wanted to close with Lydia because we have a more, when the artists are working at the residency, they're very focused on your projects, but as from a residency point, Mitch and I can see how some of these connections start to form organically, and we wanted to finish with Lydia because we feel like that kind of goes all the way around and connects all the experience of these wonderful artists together. We want to thank them for all the hard work that they did during the residency, for the challenges that we posed them and that they posed themselves, for being open to the serendipity that happens in the residency and being open to exchange with each other and our speakers that joined us at this time, with our scientific speaker and an ancestral knowledge speaker. And we want to also thank you for taking the time to watch these wonderful artists walk us through their artistic process. And we also want you to not go anywhere, because you also need to go see the finished work in the virtual art exhibition so that you can actually see the culmination of their project. Mitzi.
Thank you, gracias, Frida. Entonces, queremos agradecerles a los artistas por todo su trabajo tan intenso, tan profundo, tan en conexión con todos estos conceptos y mensajes. Y a la audiencia, gracias por estar aquí, gracias por escucharnos si esto lo estás viendo grabado. Vamos a compartir en el chat el link, que también lo vamos a dejar en el YouTube channel. Estamos compartiendo el link para que puedan navegar a sus tiempos la exposición virtual. Les recomendamos que lo hagan desde un ordenador, una computadora, una notebook, un iPad, que no sea desde el celular, que va a ser como mucho más, una experiencia mucho más acorde a estos proyectos. I can say this in English as well. So I would like to thank you, the audience. Thank you to the artists as well. And here we shared in the chat the link that we will also leave it in the YouTube channel right now. So, and we will leave it if you are watching this recorded, so that we can, you can navigate it. We suggest you to do it through, let's say, big device, not a cell phone, an iPad or a computer or a laptop or whatever like that, because it's more, it's better to do it that way regarding this project and the way we put all together this exhibition for you guys. So I think this is it. Frida, would you like to say anything in English for our closing?
I just want to thank everybody for being here, whether you're watching this live or recorded. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. Thank you to the artists, and go enjoy some cool art.
Entonces, queremos agradecerles a la audiencia, ya sea que lo estás viendo en vivo o si lo estás viendo grabado, por estar aquí, tomarte el tiempo para este espacio. Esperemos que disfruten de la exposición y queda abierto después si quieren dar una devolución a los artistas, ya sea por email o contactándolos. Inclusive si te has registrado, vamos a enviar un formulario para que puedas dejar tu devolución a los artistas, que para ellos es muy importante y para nosotros también. Muchas gracias y hasta pronto. Frida.
Thank you everybody for being here. There will be a form where you can get feedback to the artist. Please do so, or you can always email us and we will forward that to them. Good night, good evening, good afternoon for wherever you join us. Thank you so much.
Bye.